Hi, I'm Brent Jensen, and this is The Onliest Monk, Remembering Thelonious, and it's made possible by the Manieri Jazz and Swing Foundation at the Anacortes Public Library. What we'll be doing is there'll be 3 parts here, and in each one of these parts there'll be some musical excerpts, and then I'll do a little bit of speaking about Monk. I certainly don't need to do an entire chronological breakdown of his entire life. There's lots of material out there on the internet on Monk, so my perspective is that I'm giving you some leads, some things that you might want to check into, because there's a lot of material on Thelonious Monk. He was not as popular during his lifetime, certainly much more popular afterwards. The first piece that you just heard performed was Well You Needn't, and that was one of his earliest compositions. It was recorded in his first recording session that was released as The Genius of Modern Music. So Thelonious Monk, The Genius of Modern Music, on Blue Note Records. They were initially released as singles, so there'd be one song on each side, and Well You Needn't was on one side. I forget what the B side. It might have been even Round Midnight or one of his other popular tunes. And the group that was performing is a group that dedicates itself to the music of Thelonious Monk. It's called Monkstone Theocracy, and it features the leader and drummer, Greg Williamson. On bass was Chris Seimer, pianist Bill Anschel, and myself on saxophone. And so I'll get into just a few things on this first part. I'll direct you to kind of the biographical material that you might want to check out of Monk's. There was a great biography. There's several books written on Monk, but the definitive one is by Robin D.G. Kelly. It came out in 2010, and it's called Thelonious Monk, The Life and Times of an American Original. It's a very exhaustive biography. It does the typical biography thing, gives kind of like an Ancestry.com, genealogy, where he came from, his roots, his family, tree, but also gets into a lot of detail about his musical career and also his personal life, which we didn't really know a lot about until later on. He was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder, and that can be seen in some of his. If you look at some of the videos of Monk, and if you do a quick search on YouTube, you'll find a lot of video footage of him in concert. He'll have kind of strange behaviors where he'll just stand up and start dancing, kind of spinning around. I get dancing using quotation marks. It's kind of spin around, and he would do that in airports and on the street corner, and just in public life as well. Some of his mannerisms were similar to what we see in people with autism. Actually, he would be nonverbal for long periods of time, not very communicative, and he would also kind of withdraw inward a lot of times. But that was largely due to the bipolar disorder. And so they go into that and kind of talk about that a lot in the book. So that book is definitely worth checking out. There's also a couple documentaries on Thelonious Monk, and the one I kind of prefer was done by Clint Eastwood. It's called Straight No Chaser. It's available stream. I think you can find it streaming on Netflix, most streaming platforms. It's also available as a DVD. But that documentary was done back in 1988, and it also has a lot of footage of him performing in concerts, and a really good resource. They interview a lot of his family members. His sister, who is actually one of the main sources of information in the biography that Robin D.G. Kelly wrote, is quoted quite a bit in that particular that biography as well. He was one of the founders of bebop. The thing about Thelonious Monk is his music is quite different than the other main figures in the bop movement, which would be Charlie Parker, alto saxophonist, Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet, Bud Powell, who was a very dear friend of Monk and whom Monk actually mentored Bud Powell. You would think it might be the other way around, because people think of Bud Powell and think of his virtuosity and his technical ability, but it was really, he was younger. He was like a younger brother to Monk, and they hung out quite a bit, really good friends, played piano for each other all the time, but completely different types of ways of playing. Bud Powell's way of playing was much more like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, in that it was very virtuoso, because mostly the right hand, moving very quickly and doing these kind of horn lines. When you watch any of Thelonious Monk's playing, you see him using a lot of space, using both hands, playing the piano almost really as a percussive instrument. It is a percussion instrument, and in Monk's hands, he definitely played, very percussively, and his rhythmic language was very, very unique. But he was still in on the kind of the founding of bebop. Bebop starts to emerge in 1944, 1945. Those are the earliest recordings, and there was a club in Harlem, Minton's Playhouse, and he was the house pianist for that band as it started to form, and Dizzy Gillespie would come over and sit in. This was actually before Charlie Parker. I think he was still in Kansas City. He hadn't really made it to New York yet. But the drummer Kenny Clark was also a good friend of Monk. Monk and Kenny Clark enjoyed playing with each other. Kenny Clark's considered the kind of the founder of the bebop drumming school, and his rhythmic language was very similar to Monk's as well. But to show you how the language differs, just playing a melody of one of Charlie Parker or Dizzy Gillespie's melodies compared to the melodies that you hear from Monk, there's a pretty stark difference. So almost all the language, the thing with bebop that was always interesting to me is that all of its practitioners were saying, we're going to be iconoclastic, and we're going to break away, and we're going to form our own, find your own voice and be an individual. The person that was really doing that, to a severe degree was Monk. He really found his own voice, was really an individual, did his own thing. There was nobody else that played piano really that sounded like Monk. There was a couple other figures, Elmo Hope, maybe got a little bit into that type of style of playing, but really very few people. Everybody, Bud Powell was their model because he sounded on piano like Dizzy Gillespie sounded on trumpet, like Charlie Parker, who was basically calling the shots for how to phrase the melodies. In fact, here's a typical bebop melody. Lots of notes, very dense, and this is a tune called Anthropology by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. That's the first 16 measures, the first two A sections of that. So hardly a place to breathe, even in those 16 measures all the way through there. It's a lot of notes, and if I challenged you to, let's all sing that back now, shall we? Unless you've listened to that music a lot, it's not going to come immediately back to you. There's not a lot of space, there's not a lot of repetition being used. It's very densely packed music. And that particular song is based on a chord progression that was by George and Ira Gershwin called I Got Rhythm from a musical called Girl Crazy. And the rhythm changes were used a lot by the bebop players. They would create new melodies that would fit over those chords because you can copyright melodies, but you can't copyright chord progressions. So they found an interesting way around composing. They were composing using existing forms, like I Got Rhythm, or All the Things You Are, or There Will Never Be Another You, All of Me, any of those type of tunes, but don't play the melody, play a new melody instead. Here is Monk's version of his melody on those same chord progressions of I Got Rhythm. So it kind of conspicuous. It's a little bit more of an earworm, as they say, than that one's kind of flighty and going all over the place. But we bop 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 ba da ba bop ba da ba da da. It's actually very similar to, there's a children's show, I don't know if it might still be on, called Blue's Clues. And there used to be, in fact, the Monk estate could probably get some money because it's very, very similar. First 6 notes, blue skidoo, you can too. So I always thought that was a little interesting. That's a Monk tune. But actually this tune itself, Rhythmaning, was supposedly, you'll learn that if you get the biography, Mary Lou Williams, great piano player, writer, and arranger from around this particular period, well, also a good friend of Monk's. She had used that particular little idea, and Monk kind of repurposed it. So in the book, they actually give credit to, the sources of where some of these pieces come from, little bits and pieces of introductions and added on sections and so forth. So again, comparing them really closely back and forth. Here's the bebop language. First 8 measures of anthropology. It's the first 8 measures of rhythm-a-ning. He even alludes to its source. I got rhythm. It's a rhythm-a-ning. So very, very typical kind of monk melody. In fact, I'll do a little segue into our next piece that Monkstone Theocracy will be playing for you. This is an arrangement. We're going to do a couple arrangements of Bill Anshells, the pianist, and he likes to call them D-arrangements. And this is of Monk's blues. It's just a 12-bar blues, and it's called Misterioso. The melody is very interesting. It's just a bunch of intervals. It's mostly sixth, not to get too much into the theory weeds here, but and it stays that same rhythm all the way through with those intervals kind of going all the way through. And if you compare that blues, that's a blues line that he uses, to something like Charlie Parker's Au Revoir. That 12 measures has a lot more notes going on than in Monk. So Monk was really a minimalist in a lot of ways. He had his own very kind of unique language, a unique way of using rhythm and using repetition. And so we'll let you listen to Bill Anshells' arrangement of Misterioso by Thelonious Monk. you.